Wonderful. Thanks very much. Thanks very much, everybody, for joining us this evening. Caitlin, give me a thumbs up if you think we're good to go. She's giving me, she's disappeared momentarily. Yep,
I've just got to get a pen.
good to go. Yep, you get a pen.
Thank
And
you.
then perhaps if you can keep yourself on mute, that would be great until perhaps we'll do a few questions at the end. Thank you so much. We've got Caitlin Hepworth doing the tech hosting this evening, and I'd like to welcome everybody and to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands across Australia and Aotearoa, New Zealand, and to say that we pay our respects to elders past and present. We honour the enduring cultural practices of making, storytelling, and creativity that have flourished here for countless generations. These lands are home to some of the world's oldest continuing art traditions, and we recognise the deep knowledge and care held by First Nations artists, makers, and communities. And so it's with real pleasure that I welcome everyone to our Meet the Presenter series and to welcome Gabrielle Warr, who's joining us from Ravenna in Italy.
Thank you so
Welcome,
much for
Gabrielle.
inviting me.
Thank you so much for coming. Um, I thought we might start, Gabrielle, by just asking a few questions about how you, a Canadian, came to find yourself living and working in Ravenna.
Wow. Okay, so that's a long question, but or a long answer, I suppose, to your question. But let's give you the short version. So when I was in my 20s, I decided that I wanted to go to school in Italy to art school. And so I traveled. My sister was living here, so that was easy. I had a place to crash when I arrived, and I really, really tried hard to get into a school here. But the problem at the time was that you couldn't get a student visa unless you were already enrolled in a university or a college back home, and then you would transfer to your college or to your Italian university. And so, not being able to get my student visa, I ended up staying here because I'd met a gentleman who I now am not with anymore, but ended up staying here, finding work. And the work that I found just happened to be a mosaic studio here in Ravenna as an interpreter. And so I started working with Luciana Notturni, who is a master mosaicist here in Ravenna. Some of you may or may not know her, or you may have come in and done courses with her. And so at the time, I was her interpreter and still am. I still work there. And of course, as an artist, I absorbed all of that information for years. So I've been working with her for 30 years now. And yeah, that's how I ended up here in Ravenna specifically, and fell in love with mosaics that way.
That's incredible, Gabrielle. So, was your own training in mosaic from Luciana?
It was, yeah. So the idea was she initially basically said to me, you need to understand what you're talking about when you're explaining things. And so she ended up having me do the traditional course. And then from there, especially for artistic things, I think I retain information quite well. And so I just kind of absorbed everything that she would say. And so I learned a lot just through translating and through helping and through kind of just being, the somebody just giving a hand in the studio, just as people would have done in ancient times, right? Like there would have been in ancient times people learning a craft through helping out around the studio, and then they would, graduate to different positions. And that's kind of what happened with me. Same sort of thing.
So it's almost a traditional training model, isn't it? That in
Exactly.
studio
Yeah.
training. Yep.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm.
And so the micromosaic, so I started obviously with reproductions and doing traditional Byzantine reproductions from Ravenna and from other, other sites and styles, so Roman flooring and also vermiculatum, which is also small, right? It's micromosaic, but with stone from Roman times, Roman floors. And then from there, so Luciana got to know a woman from Rome who was selling micromosaics and had this connection with this woman. And Luciana insisted that she wanted to learn the technique. And so Luciana went to Rome and learned the technique, but decided that it wasn't for her. And so she brought it back to Ravenna. She was one of the first people in Italy to learn the technique outside of sort of a select few. Like it was such a secret at the time. And we're talking like probably 20 years ago now. In Rome, it had been kept a secret for centuries. And there weren't many people who were teaching it. And so Luciana kind of opened up the floodgates a little bit to that whole thing. And she then brought this teacher to Ravenna to teach in our studio, but also to teach at the Fine Arts Academy here. And so that's why it started to spread kind of like wildfire after that, because nobody knew anything about it and everybody wanted to know, but nobody could find people who were teaching it. And so from there, it kind of exploded. And yeah, yeah.
It seems that micromosaic is a form of mosaic that really, in some ways, had a big heyday around the time of the Grand Tour and the making of a lot of souvenirs and decorative tabletops and things like that. I just wanted to say that I first came across your work when a beautiful little video that you had made about a daisy somehow drifted into my social media feed, and I'm not sure how that happened. It must have been sort of 3 or 4 years ago, and when I was in Ravenna a year or two later, I looked you up, I contacted you and said, "Can I come and meet with you?" And that's kind of how this connection happened. I was amazed to learn that you do your own silver work as well as actually making the filati. And I think that we have a little section of that video. I wondered if we could look at that together, Caitlin, and perhaps Gabrielle, you can speak to what we might watch together.
Sure.
Thank you. So if you can explain to us what you're doing, Gabrielle.
Yeah, of course. So, what you see me doing here is filling my custom base with a handmade binder, which is called stucco or stucco, as we call it in Italian. It's a product that I hand make, and it's a really long process to make it. So, what I'm doing here is I'm filling my bezel with that product. And that's one of the things that we'll be doing during the workshops is I'll be bringing in my stucco. I'll teach you how to use it because it's not an easy product to use. Um, and yeah, so that's one of the things that you guys will be doing during the workshop. Here I'm cutting down what we call master tints. So master tints are a type of material that are specific for micromosaics because what you see here is not actually black, but it's probably a blue or a green. I'm not entirely sure because they all look black when they are when they're not melted down, and then you have to mix them with white. So what you can see me doing here is mixing it with the white, and when I pull it, you'll see the color finally come out. So it's complex because you have to mix your own colors sometimes. I'm shaping the material, so I've melted it. I'm gathering it on the end of a poker, and I'm basically melting it into a specific shape and forming it into a specific shape. And here you can see I'm starting to pull these filaments of glass. So this looks like it might be a really light blue, probably to do some of the shading in the daisy, most likely. And yeah, and so here I'm just working. It's sped up, obviously, and you can see that I've got andamento, I've got direction, I've got organization in this little daisy here. Yeah, different shapes. So you can see in the center there's circles, and in the petals there's rectangles. So when pulling these filati, you can make whatever shape you want, basically. I've made all sorts of shapes, including like little bone shapes to make skeletons, little heart shapes, little star shapes. You can make pretty much any shape you want for the filati. So things that you don't find in the industrial filati. Industrial filati come in just a few shapes, so maybe flats, curves, round, um, and petal shapes. But like stars and bone shapes, you would never find in the industrial filati. So it's nice to be able to make your own shapes.
Fantastic. A lot of these, a lot of these filati that we're looking at here are quite elongated, aren't they? So that I guess you can lay them, set them in such a way to maintain the andamento.
That's right. Yeah. So basically, what you see is the cross section of the top of the filati. So, what I basically do is I take my long filato filament and with a diamond file and a pair of tweezers, I score the filament and I break it off. And so what you're seeing is the top, and it's probably about 2 millimeters deep into the stucco. That's
Mm.
more or less. It depends on the depth of the bezel or the base that I'm working with.
Mm. And Gabrielle, you were talking about the stucco binder. You were saying it's not an easy product to use and it's something that you create. It takes some time to make. Can you tell us? I'm not asking you for the recipe, but I'm
No,
curious
yeah.
to know, and I'm sure other people are too, to know a little bit more about what this is as a binder.
Yeah, so it's a product that was invented probably somewhere around the 1700s, although some people think that it's older than that. It's an oil-based product, and basically it gets made in two phases. So there's a first phase where you mix all the ingredients and you let it sit, and it has to sit for and cure for like a year. And then you can take that product, which is hard like a rock, like it gets super, super hard. And then you have to grind it into a powder again, and then you have to add oils back into it. And that's the point where you can use it. And so in the workshops, what I do is I will be bringing the product with me, hoping, I'm really hoping that I can make it, get it into the country because I'm a little bit worried about customs and them thinking that it's going to be a drug or something like that. But in any
I
case,
think you'll be
um,
fine. It'll be fine.
yeah. So I'll be bringing the hard product in, and then we'll have people grind it up into a powder, and then we're going to mix the oils directly in the workshop. We'll mix the oils in, and I'll show you how to mix it to get it to the consistency that you need it because it's a tricky consistency. It's a little bit like baking bread because you have to add in the liquid super slowly so that it doesn't just get super soft and squishy. You want a sort of putty consistency. And then that product, once you've used it, it then slowly, slowly dries until it's rock hard again. But it takes, depending on the oils, it can take weeks for it to dry, which is why these mosaics tend to be quite expensive. Is not only is the technique time consuming, but the binder is a slow, slow, slow drying binder. And so I can't sell a piece unless it's been sitting for a few weeks, basically.
Mm. So
Um,
when you finish these, Gabrielle, I'm interested in how you level them. Is there further finishing? I mean, you don't grout these or anything. Are they waxed? Are
no,
they polished? Or are they just you finish them and they're finished? How do you do that?
yeah, it depends. So sometimes I just leave them as they are. I do one step, which I will show during the workshop. I give them a press when they're finished. So I take a stone or, some flat object really, and I flatten off the top. And that's the levels of placement of the stucco and placement of the tester is something that we're really going to concentrate on during the workshops because that's one of the hardest things especially for students to obtain when they've never done this before.
Mm.
um, the depths of the pieces and the amount of stucco is a really tricky thing to balance. And so I'll explain really in detail how to get those levels correct in such a way that you can press the top and make it super flat and super level when you're finished. Because often what happens is that they're too deep and then you can't press it and you end up with a really irregular surface. So one of the nicest ways, in my opinion, to finish a micromosaic is just to give it a quick press. And then what you get is similar to traditional mosaics, where you have this very slightly irregular surface. So it's still a wearable product where it doesn't snag or catch on things, but it has enough irregularity that it really sparkles. So it catches the light because it's glass and it reflects, and it's just a really beautiful, sparkly surface.
Mm.
Alternatively, sometimes, not very often, I will grind and polish a piece to make it as smooth as the ancient pieces, or the antique pieces, I should say, where there is a sort of grouting or waxing process where I color the wax and I put that on the surface, and then I grind down the entire surface to get a super smooth and uniform surface.
Mm.
It's beautiful. It's very painterly, so it ends up looking like a painting. You can't really tell that it's a mosaic anymore. But yeah, I honestly prefer not to do that because it's a long and time-consuming process that kind of eliminates the mosaicness of these pieces. You
Yes,
kind
and
of lose the mosaic in the piece.
yes, and when it becomes a departure from mosaic and a return to painting somehow, it's as though the path has been lost in a way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Gabrielle, I just want to go back for a moment to the very, the range of skills that you exercise when you're making your work. So you've obviously got these silversmithing skills as well as the production of the filati, the glasswork itself. Can you explain a little bit more about how you learned these skills and what you're actually doing in these processes?
Sure. So where to start? So the I guess the silversmithing came after I learned the filato. So I started making filato. I started working on store-bought bezels, and it was tricky in the sense that it's really hard to find store-bought bezels that are deep enough for what we do. Um, and and also I kind of wanted shapes. Like I didn't just want round or oval. And so I ended up contacting a number of different goldsmiths and silversmiths that are local or even just in Italy in general. But nobody was willing to make me something. Um, it was either really expensive or they were like, no, I want to concentrate on my own stuff. I don't want to make things for other people because everybody in Italy is an artist. I sort of chalk it up to that. But that made me sort of, it forced me to go and learn the silversmithing. So I went and learned it in London, just outside of London, with a woman. I did it in London because I wanted to do it in English rather than in Italian, and my brain needed to simplify it because it's already a lot of information. So to do it in Italian would have been tricky. So I learned a little bit of silversmithing. It wasn't a lot. So it's honestly not a complicated thing to do. So the silversmithing for me at least wasn't super difficult to learn, but it was something that I wasn't necessarily wanting to concentrate a lot of my energy on because I kind of really wanted to do the mosaics. So yeah, I didn't really put that much effort into learning it. I literally, it was like 2 days. I did, two separate courses of one day.
Wow.
And it's really enough.
Mm.
It's really enough.
I'm wondering, while we talk about this, if Caitlin, it might be possible, please, to have some images that Gabrielle has shared with us so that we can demonstrate to people as we speak about some of this work. And maybe, Gabrielle, you can just speak a little bit about each of these pieces. Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah. So this was one of the first sort of really complex pieces that I made in the silver, in the silver. Um, so it basically requires to draw or to come up with an image. I draw that out in a sketchbook, and then I trace a really basic outline of that design, the outline of the, in this case, the bird, and then I take my silver and I outline the image with a what's called a bezel wire. So it's a really sort of wide, flat wire. And I make my whole design with that. And then I solder that to a back plate and I saw it out and then I polish and grind down the edges and stuff like that. And then I finally have something that I can make a mosaic in. So my whole goal is to make the mosaic. So I have all of these steps that I have to do before I can do that. But it means yeah, it means having a custom shape that I can work with.
And what sort of size is the piece that we're looking at? This little, is a hummingbird?
It is a hummingbird. It's about the size of a hummingbird, ironically, because I didn't sort of do it on purpose, but it's probably about 2 centimeters, 3 centimeters long, about this big,
Wow. Wow.
approximately. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Next one, maybe, Caitlin?
Yeah. So this was a commission that I did a couple, probably about 4 or 5 years ago now. Um, a little robin. So same thing. So it's, yeah, custom bezel wire in the shape. So usually in this case, I created an actual painting. With the previous one, the hummingbird, I took a photograph. So usually I work from a photograph to start. Um, and I have a photograph next to me while I work, and I try and get the endamental. So this is one of the topics for the symposium, right? So fragments and flow, and so the flow you can see in the wings. I've followed sort of a direction to the lines. I've got andamento that gives you the impression of these feathers. So I use the photograph as inspiration. I often create a painting because it simplifies the photograph. It gives you an easier set of colors to follow also. At least I have an idea of how I want to approach the mosaic. And so, yeah, that's kind of the process. I don't often um, work with sort of a set design on the stucco itself. Um, it's kind of a sketch that I have sitting next to me usually.
Mm. That was one of the questions I had. I was wondering whether it gets a bit scary sometimes that you might kind of get lost in the abyss of the stucco, and because a lot of us now will make a mosaic with the cartoon under plastic or under mesh so that
Right.
we have something there. And to me at least, and I think to some other people, it sort of seems a bit scary that you might get lost without having the map there. But um,
Yeah. So I have a couple of different tricks up my sleeve for how to avoid that. Well, one thing is that with micromosaic, because the stucco is so slow drying, you can make as many mistakes as you want because you have all the time in the world to fix them. So often what I'll do is I'll just throw stuff into the stucco without really, paying too much attention to where everything is. And then I will at the end go back and take things out and I will fix them and I will move them and I will change a color. So I do go back and move things around quite a lot. Another thing that I sometimes do is, depending on the complexity of the design, I will create a cartoon on a type of tracing paper that I can lay into the bezel itself and follow the design. So this is the image. In this case, I'm working on two separate pieces at the same time. They're identical. And so you can see that on the left, I've got the top of the tree cut out of the tracing, and so I'm filling that section in, and I'm going to cut out another section and fill that section in. And what I can also do is have a separate tracing. So I often have two of these tracings done, one that I set directly into the bezel and another one where I overlay it, like I just sort of place it on top to make sure that everything is where it should be. So it's a little bit like the having, your image under the mosaic that you're making. In this case, I kind of place it on top and just make sure that everything is in the place and where it should be.
it's important, I think, for us to be able to go into these questions about technique, because everybody develops their own solutions, and to see that
Absolutely.
partial removal of the design as you work is a really great strategy for avoiding that kind of, oh, I'm lost in the abyss of the stucco. And
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's a
uh,
technique that is historical, right? So it's not something that I've come up with, but it is something
mm,
that has been done for centuries,
wow.
where they had a cartoon that they would place into the bezel before making the mosaic. Even when they were reproducing paintings in the 1700s, it was a similar method. So I'm just taking that and making it my own in the sense that I've got tracing paper that I can overlay and just make sure things are in place because they do shift around. Even if you've got that paper there, they tend to shift around.
Of course. And as you work, you may want to improvise a little thing. You may want to slightly change the tonality of a tree trunk
Yeah,
or something. We've had a
exactly.
question come up. Jane has asked a question about what kind of designs people might be doing in the workshop, and we've got some images on slide. Do you want to speak to that question and what we're looking at?
Sure. So I'm actually in the process of preparing the little kits and the materials to bring, and I'm trying to give everybody a sort of a variety of different shapes and colors and things to play with. And what you see here in the photograph is some design examples that you could make with these little kits. So I'm creating a couple of different color schemes. So I've got some cooler tones, so like blues and turquoises and greens, and then I've got another set which are warm colors, so reds and oranges and yellows. And so these are some really simple examples of what people could probably produce during a course in playing with materials to create different gradients or different textures. You could make something more figurative, so you could probably do a little landscape if you wanted. You could probably do like a little beetle. You could play with the petal shapes and things like that to give yourself the possibility to make a little flower design. It's really quite versatile in that there's going to be a lot of choice, and for sure the material will be enough to make multiple pieces. So during the course, we'll probably only have time to make one per person, but there is enough material to then go home and make more and just have the opportunity to play with the materials and play with those levels and play with the textures and the shapes and things like that.
That's wonderful. Gabrielle, do you use any kind of magnifying device when you do this? I know people are going to have a few questions around the tools. We've had a question around the diamond file as well, but my question was, do you need something to help you see something so tiny?
Yes. Well, in terms of magnification, I scare myself a little bit, but I used to work without any magnification. And my eyes used to be very, very good. Now, nowadays, I do wear readers. So it's one thing that, I sort of underestimated the function of just a simple pair of readers is enough sometimes. A strong pair of readers maybe is enough sometimes. I do have like what are they called? Like a ring light magnifier
Oh, yeah.
that I use very rarely. I don't like to use it very much because they tend to be hard on the eyes. And so I will use it if I have something that I can't quite figure out and it's not going in, or things have moved, or if it's really, really small and I need to really sort of figure out how I'm going, where I'm putting things. I will use a larger magnification, but oftentimes it's enough just to have a strong pair of readers. Um, Other tools that I really find useful, obviously, I've got the diamond file and the tweezers, which will be part of your kits. Um, the diamond file is a triangular shaped file, so I use the edges of the triangle file, and then I use the tweezers to snap off the pieces. Um, and other tools, obviously, there's the whole melting set of tools, which we won't really be using during the workshops. But to form the materials, one of the best tools is just stuff that I have laying around the studio, like chunks of rock. Like I use stones primarily to shape the glass. Yeah, so
Great,
anyway,
great. We've had another question come in from
sure.
Marion asking, would it help to bring an extra light source, such as the neck lights used for knitting and other crafts?
That's actually a really good suggestion. Yeah, if you have one, I would highly recommend it. Sometimes because we don't know the exact conditions of these workshop sites, and so sometimes the lighting is great and you can see fine, and other times you do need an extra light source. So by all means, it's a great suggestion. Yeah.
Mm. It's a very personal thing too, how much light you need. I like to work in a
Yes.
flood of light. I know some other people are quite different and they like to have much more refined or subdued. They don't necessarily want to be, under a flood. Um,
Exactly. Yeah. Everybody's different for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Beata is asking if you teach in Ravenna.
I do, yeah. I have my own studio, and I can accommodate probably about four or five people, 4 people probably max, currently. So yeah, I do teach in Ravenna.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, where you would learn the melting. I mean, because with the workshops, unfortunately, we can't really most of the time be doing that. I know in Byron Bay they do have a torch there, and so I will be able to give a quick demonstration on the glass melting process. It's one of the few places where I will be able to do that.
It's very tantalizing, I know, for our members and other people who've enrolled in some of these workshops to see the complexity and the apparent, grace and deceptively simple way in which, you make this appear. Obviously, there's so much that we can only grasp a little tiny bit in a small space of time. Um, what advice would you have for those members of MANS and others attending the workshops who might want to learn some of these other aspects? Where would they go to learn, for example, how to pull falati?
There aren't that many places. So I think Italy is one of the few places where you can learn that technique. I might be one of the only people teaching it in English. So there are people in Rome well, the woman who comes to Ravenna to teach at the academy, she does workshops, but it's all in Italian. So you can't, unless you speak Italian. Um, so I'm one of the few people who's teaching it in English. So yeah. Uh,
Maybe
that
that's for another
said,
trip.
sorry, say that again.
Maybe that's for another trip to Australia.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. We have to find a studio who can accommodate the glass pulling, but for sure, it's something that I would love to do.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Do we have any more questions that people, you can pop your questions into the chat line. Um, we thought we would talk for 40 or 45 minutes this evening. It's morning, of course, for Gabrielle. If there's something else you'd like to ask, please pop it into the chat line. Um, and while we're waiting perhaps for another question or two to come through, Gabrielle, you do come to Australia because your father lives here, doesn't he? You have a
That's right.
relationship.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So it's a funny coincidence in that when I was in my I was turning 20 on my 20th birthday, basically, I moved to Italy and my dad moved to Australia. He had met a an Australian woman who he moved to Australia for, and so he's been there ever since. So we've both been in our respective foreign countries for the exact same amount of time, which is kind of wild to me. And so I visited him a couple of years ago, I guess now. Yeah, 2 years ago in Melbourne. He lives in Ballarat, and so it's really great for me to come to the symposium because I get to spend time with him as well. So it's just such a great, yeah, a great combo.
That's lovely. That's great. Thank you. We've got just a couple more questions, and then we
Sure,
might wind things up in a few minutes. So
sure.
Nancy has said, I always struggle to find good tweezers. What are your favorites? I have a bit of osteoarthritis.
That's a hard one. I actually look for tweezers mostly through the jewelry communities, so like stone setters tweezers. And they tend to be really, really long. So they're quite, they're a fairly long pair of tweezers and they have a really fine point on them. So that's what I use. Unfortunately, if you've got osteoarthritis, one thing that you might want to look into is to maybe you can get these like silicone putties, these two-component silicone putties. You could probably make a handle for it, and just sort of nudge it onto the end so that you have something a bit thicker to hold on to. With osteoarthritis, it's a bit harder to squeeze and to hold smaller things. And so that might be a solution.
Mm. I
But
love the way that your experience in teaching means that you have a solution. You're really good at proposing solutions to these problems. It's one thing to be a very skilled mosaicist. It's another thing to be a really good teacher. And I love
well,
the way
thank you.
you're great with
Thank
solutions.
you.
Beata is asking if you mainly use smelty to pull filati or other glass as well.
Well, okay, so the there's different types of glass in the world. Let's start here. Smalty is specific for mosaics, and for filati, it is possible to use smalty. So I do use smalty in my work. However, the more professional material for filati is actually a different type of glass called master tint glass. And master tint glass is a material that has a higher quantity of minerals and pigments in it. And not only that, but it melts at the same, all of the different colors melt at the same rate and they cool at the same rate and they expand and contract at the same rate, which means that we can mix them together and create new colors. Whereas if I try and mix two different smalties together, they often won't combine properly. And when you try and cut them or when you try and work with them, they kind of disintegrate. They kind of they become brittle and they fall apart. And so I do use smalty, but I use one color at a time. So I won't mix them together because it can be, it won't necessarily hold together through time. So maybe in 10 years, it'll start to disintegrate. It's hard to know with these materials. Whereas the master tints are meant to be mixed together. And in fact, you saw me cutting that black, but that was probably blue or it might have been green. I'm not sure which, but they are dark enough that you have to sort of mix them with other colors or with white to get the color to come out. And so primarily in my own work, I tend to use the master tints.
Great, thank you. We had a conversation this afternoon, actually, Beata, with about coefficients of expansion and fusing and so on. So I'm sure that your workshops in Australia will provoke much more curiosity and questions, and hopefully some more answers as well about how to use these materials.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Does anybody else have a burning question they'd like to ask this evening? Caitlin, is there anything I've missed in the chat line
Well,
that
I
you
just
think?
thought maybe you could discuss the availability of places to catch Gabrielle across the
Absolutely.
symposium. And I think there's just a couple left on the tour, but there are some mainly at the symposium.
That's right. So there are, I think, 3 places left in New South Wales, aren't there, for the tour?
That's correct, in Northern New South Wales with Jane Dennison. So they are selling fast. And I think today, Gabrielle's workshop in Victoria is sold out completely. So the main place where is availability is at the symposium itself on the Saturday and Sunday, which are both one-day workshops.
Yeah. And if people are really busting to do a workshop which has sold out, do put your name on their wait list because places do from time to time become available. So Nancy's asked for details for the Northern New South Wales. You can just have a look on the website, Nancy, on the Man's website under Workshops Tour and follow the links under New South Wales and that'll take you through. Unless anybody else has anything burning to ask, I would just like to thank Caitlin very much for hosting us this evening. And of course, a massive thank you to Gabrielle Warr for joining us.
It was a real pleasure. I really enjoyed the chat today. I'm just so excited to come and do these workshops and meet all of these people that are so curious and so interested. So I'm really, really, really looking forward to it. It's going to be such an honor to be there.
Well, the honor is ours, Gabrielle. Thank you so much. We've got some lovely thanks coming through on the chat
I
line.
see
And
that.
thank you,
Thank you.
everyone, for joining
Thank
us
you.
this evening, and for those people who might watch this on recording. Thank you. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye,
Thanks.
everyone.
Bye.
Give us a wave.